Okay, so are you ready to dive into some heavy stuff today?
Always up for a challenge. What do we have on the docket today?
Well, we're talking hurricane season in Florida,
Okay.
but not just the wind and rain kind of storm.
I'm sensing a but here.
You could say that the political kind of storm.
So we're talking about the political firestorm surrounding Hurricane Helene and the even bigger one brewing with Hurricane Milton.
Exactly. You've got these communities in Florida. I mean, they're reeling from Helene, right?
Yeah.
Trying to pick up the pieces. And suddenly, it's like the news is flooded with this controversy about Governor DeSantis and Vice President Harris.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that even when it comes to natural disasters, politics doesn't exactly take a break.
It's kind of disheartening when you put it like that. So before we get into all that political drama, let's set the scene a little bit for anyone who maybe hasn't been glued to the news lately. Two hurricanes, Helene and Milton, both have Florida in their sights. What kind of impact are we really talking about here?
We're talking widespread devastation. Homes reduced to rubble, businesses completely flooded. I mean, countless families are displaced right now. The images coming out of Florida are heartbreaking, to be honest. You see people wading through waist-deep water, just trying to salvage anything they can from their homes. It's tough to watch.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's easy to get caught up in the whole political back and forth, but at the end of the day, we're talking about real people whose lives have been completely turned upside down.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole political controversy even more jarring. You shared a CNN article that detailed how news broke that DeSantis hadn't returned calls from Vice President Harris.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
She was trying to coordinate federal relief efforts.
You know, I'd heard about that, but I have to admit, at first I kind of brushed it off as just some gossip,
Right.
Like, how much weight can a missed phone call really hold?
Well, I think in this case, it's not just about the missed phone call itself. It's about what that missed call represents, especially in the wake of a devastating hurricane like this. A lot of people are interpreting it as DeSantis putting politics over people, prioritizing political point scoring over actually ensuring the well-being of the people in his state, especially considering he pulled a similar move after Hurricane Idalia earlier this year by avoiding a meeting with President Biden.
Oh, right. Now that you mention it, that's right. This isn't the first time that DeSantis has kind of taken this approach. There are some interesting parallels in how he handled that situation as well. So is this like a pattern of behavior or just a coincidence? I mean, is DeSantis uniquely bad at this, or is this, a symptom of a larger trend where disaster relief is becoming increasingly politicized?
That's the fascinating thing about this. It's not an isolated incident. Sadly, this has happened time and time again throughout history. Politicians using these moments of crisis to score points, shift blame, or try to control the narrative.
Right. And that just feels especially icky when you're talking about something as immediate and devastating as a hurricane. I mean, people are literally picking up the pieces of their lives.
Exactly. And I think that's why this story in particular has really resonated with people. It kind of begs the question, what are the real priorities here? Are we more concerned with political maneuvering or with actually helping those who are most in need?
And, it's not like DeSantis is exactly shying away from all of this. He's got his own side of the story, of course.
Oh, absolutely. DeSantis is pushing back pretty hard against these accusations.
Yeah, how so?
Well, he's claiming she wasn't aware of Harris's calls and that he was busy focusing on, direct communication with President Biden and FEMA.
Interesting.
So he's basically framing it as, look, I'm cutting out the middleman here, dealing directly with the people who can actually get things done.
Well, and he didn't mince words about it either, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, he even went as far as to say that Harris has no role and called her involvement selfish, which I gotta say, ouch. Someone get the bird cream. But seriously, what's the strategy behind using that kind of language, especially in this situation?
It's a calculated risk, for sure.
Yeah.
On one hand, it feeds into this DeSantis as a fighter image.
Right.
Which, some of his supporters really seem to love. He's presenting himself as someone who won't be swayed by political pressure or what he might see as unnecessary distractions.
I can see that. But on the other hand,
it risks alienating those who might see it as callous, even insensitive, especially at a time when people are hurting and desperate for help. It kind of plays into this narrative that he's more concerned with political posturing than with actually addressing the needs of the people he represents.
Makes sense. So how's the White House responding to all of this? I mean, they're not just sitting back and taking it, are they?
Well, no, but they're definitely in a tough spot.
Yeah.
They want to project an image of stability and support, but they're also having to contend with these very pointed attacks from DeSantis. The White House has made it clear that they extended an invitation to DeSantis to join Biden on his visit to Florida to survey the hurricane damage, which DeSantis declined.
Which, just from a purely optic standpoint, doesn't look great for DeSantis, does it?
It's certainly a point of contention. So yeah, the White House is walking this tightrope, trying to provide aid and show support while also pushing back against this idea that they're somehow being unhelpful or shut out.
And then you've got Hurricane Helene already wreaking havoc. And oh yeah, let's not forget about Hurricane Milton looming out in the Atlantic. It's like a double whammy. And in the middle of all of this, you've got Vice President Harris trying to cut through the noise. That CNN article you shared actually highlighted her response, and she seems to be taking a very different approach.
Yeah, for sure. While DeSantis is sort of on the offensive here, Harris seems to be taking a very different tack. She's emphasizing unity and cooperation, putting people first. There was a statement she released recently that really emphasized that.
Which, I mean, that focus on people, that's got to be crucial right now, especially with Hurricane Milton on the way. What's the latest on that storm? And how are the hurricane preparations being impacted by all this political back and forth?
So the latest forecasts are showing Hurricane Milton is gaining strength. Some models are predicting it could reach Category 3 status before it makes landfall. And while emergency management officials are definitely urging residents to finalize their preparations and heed any evacuation orders.
Which, side note, if you are in an evacuation zone, please, please, please take those warnings seriously.
100%. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that all of this political drama is adding another layer of complexity to the situation.
It's wild to me. You know, it's like they're speaking two totally different languages.
Right.
One side is all about sandbags and evacuation routes, the practical stuff, and the other side, it's all political games. It's like they forget there's a hurricane barreling down on us.
And that's exactly the danger here. When politics starts to seep into every single aspect of disaster response, it just creates this undercurrent of distrust and confusion.
Yeah.
Think about it. You're a resident, right? You're in Florida trying to decide if you need to evacuate, and all you're hearing are these conflicting messages from the people who are supposed to be leading you through this. It's a recipe for chaos.
No kidding. And it makes me wonder, does any of this political maneuvering even matter to the people on the ground? Like, does it actually affect how quickly aid gets to the people who need it?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's hard to say definitively whether a politician's words directly translate into, boots on the ground or aid getting where it needs to go. But here's what we do know. When it comes to effective disaster relief, the name of the game is cooperation. You need federal, state, and those local agencies all working together.
It's like a giant, complicated dance.
Right. Exactly. A very delicate dance.
Everyone has to hit their marks perfectly.
And when you throw in these political tensions, the posturing, the blame game, it throws everything off balance. That can lead to delays, miscommunication, and at the end of the day, people not getting the help that they so desperately need.
That's what it always comes back down to. So we kind of circle back to our original point. What does all of this mean in the grand scheme of things? I mean, we have this hurricane season that everyone's saying is going to be one of the worst we've ever seen, and you combine that with how fractured the political landscape already is. It's a little scary, to be honest.
It's definitely a sobering thought, and it forces us to ask ourselves this difficult question. What happens when disaster relief just becomes another pawn in this game of politics? What are the long-term consequences for our ability to respond to these weather events, especially as they become more and more frequent?
Yeah, it's like we're watching this train wreck in slow motion, and we know more storms are coming, but we're just not doing enough to get off the tracks.
And that's the question we'll leave you with today. As we head into this hurricane season, will we keep politicizing every disaster? Or will we demand better from our leaders and urge them to put aside their differences, and actually prioritize the well-being of the people they represent?
It's a question we all have to grapple with, because at the end of the day, the answer has very real consequences. Well, on that note, we're wrapping up another deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we navigated this very complex and honestly concerning intersection of politics and disaster relief. Stay safe out there, stay informed, and let's all hope for calmer waters ahead.